Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith. I'm a keynote speaker and author, and welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I've found is that there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data, but there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for DEI stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these inclusive actions and policies within your own organization to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Theresa Fletcher-Brown, who's the Director and EEO Officer for the Chicago Transit Authority. This week, our conversation is about Illinois becoming the first state to ban book bans, New York City paying a minimum wage to food delivery workers, and more. Let's get started. Theresa, will you please introduce yourself?
I would be happy to. Good morning. And Bernadette, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about being here. As you mentioned, I am Theresa Fletcher-Brown, Director of EEO and Compliance Programs for the Chicago Transit Authority. I am a transit professional with over 25 years of transit-related experience. And I currently oversee CTA's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. My team and I host a diversity conversation in the workplace called Common Grounds. We host that platform on a monthly basis and we discuss hard topics. We talk about the hard things. We make sure that we're bringing truth and honesty to people's lived experiences. And so I'm very excited to be here today with the Equality Institute and you to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I love what you're doing with the Common Ground series. I mean, your employees are really at the front line. So many of them are working directly with customers or passengers, whatever. Is that the term you use, passengers or
Customers.
customers? Yeah. And so I would imagine you all see a thing or two. And there must be a lot of hard conversations that come up during those common ground sessions. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how those sessions have been helping your employees sort of process the everyday experience of what they see?
I would love to. So, Common Grounds is my baby. I literally launched Common Grounds in 2021 here at the CTA. We had a diversity and inclusion task force before that. Thankfully, we have a president that focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we had a larger task force chaired by my CAO, Tom McCone. And I just felt like, at the level that we were operating at, the information or the messaging was not reaching our frontline employees, and it wasn't reaching, for me, a target audience, which was really middle management. As the EEO officer for the CTA, my team and I investigate claims of discrimination and harassment in the workplace, right? And so we don't want people experiencing discrimination, especially based on various protected statuses like race and gender and things like that. And so I have to be honest that it was very self serving. I thought, if we can talk about the hard stuff, if we can have a conversation with middle management and encourage them to bring their team to the discussion, how could we impact the cases, the claims that we see about individuals or groups of individuals feeling like they are being discriminated in the workplace, especially racial discrimination. And I identify as a Black woman. My pronouns are she, her. It's important to me that people that look like me, people that I identify with, that they're not experiencing that type of harm in the workplace. So Common Grounds was launched in 2021. Originally, we thought it was heavy and kind of lofty, and so we were sort of unpacking topics like unconscious bias and institutional racism. We were unpacking those topics over a quarterly basis because we thought we really need to have this conversation and be intentional about it. But now we've evolved, and each month we pick a different topic and we just have the conversation. Last month, I was very fortunate to have to outside speakers. And you should come and speak to Common Ground sometime. We love to have outside speakers so that I am not the only person facilitating these monthly conversations. But last month, because it was American or Asian American and Pacific Islander month, we had a guest speaker from that community. And it was also Jewish Heritage Month. And so we had a speaker from that community as well. So that's what we do at Common Grounds.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think it's so important that your work really revolves around improving the work experience for people like you and people from other marginalized groups, because I can imagine that it's got to be pretty tough for
It
lots of reasons. So, when things get tough with work and when you are investigating charges of discrimination that maybe sometimes feel a bit close to home, I can imagine that must happen from time to time. So, what gives you hope?
what gives me hope? I'm hopeful about a lot of things. So I'll make it both personal and professional, but I'm hopeful that CTA allows me to do this work. There are still organizations grappling with how to talk to their talk to their employees about things that we're talking about very freely. I asked for permission to launch Common Grounds, and I was not only granted the permission, but I was granted the support. I'll give you a quick example. Last month, during the event that I talked about, where we had two guest speakers, um, long story short, we had a problem with getting our marketing material out in time, and so the day of the event, I only had 40 people registered, and typically about half of my registered participants actually show up. I sent my boss an email. Now the event is scheduled to take place at 11:30. I sent him an email at like 9 o'clock and said, "Hey, I've only got 40 people registered for this event, and I'm going to be really embarrassed if they're talking to an audience of 20 people. I need more people. Can you, send something out?" And within moments, the numbers started ticking up. I ended up with 110 people, I think, registered for the
Wow.
event. And about 89 to 90 of those folks showed up. So my point there is I get supported. And that's so important. So for
Mm.
me, I'm hopeful that I work for an organization that not only allows this to happen, but that they support it at various levels in the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a great story, Teresa. And I think that for everyone listening, get the leaders to say, go to this event, right? I think that it's so important for leaders to attend themselves
Yes.
and to, encourage other folks to attend, even if it is because they feel like they need to be seen by leadership. It is a pretty powerful incentive for folks. So I think that's a really great tip there as well. In this week's newsletter, I was writing about just sort of being a little bit fatigued myself, seeing that a little bit in some of the audiences that my team has been working with this month, fewer questions in some of our workshops than in the past. And so just sort of wondering if there's this sort of more general sense of DEI fatigue happening, and if that's something that you're witnessing as well.
I would agree. This work is heavy. It can sometimes feel burdensome, especially as a person of color. One of the things that I talk about is, don't make the individual who's marginalized or the marginalized groups become your Wikipedia. Right? There's a lot of conversation out there about, well, I'm curious and I want to know more, and that's fine. But there's so much information available on on online, on blogs, on posts, on podcasts. I mean, there's just information overload if you're really curious about this DNI space. So the fatigue is real, especially for people of color, especially for women, especially for any individual or groups of individual who are marginalized. So the fatigue comes from that as well. But I am hopeful and I'm really appreciative to be in this role. And I didn't start here. My journey to this DEI space was really a long one and one that I didn't even know that I'd end up in. But because I'm so passionate about the work, it doesn't feel like work all the time. I enjoy the work that I do in this space. I have become certified twice as a diversity, equity, and inclusion executive. And so I'm really passionate about it, and I'm happy to fight the good fight and continue fighting the good fight. So while it is heavy, and we can often feel fatigue, and I think that's natural, I think we pick the mantle back up and we keep doing the work that we're passionate about.
Well, that is what those are wise words, and you fit in right here in the five things, good vibes in DEI universe. So thank you so much. All right, so let's get into this week's good vibes. The first story comes from the University of Maryland at Baltimore, which held a separate ceremony this month to honor therapy and service dogs, conferring doctorate degrees on the companions of three recent graduates. So, this event was about recognizing the dog's important role in providing comfort and assistance to students and patients. Little feel good story to start us off, Theresa.
For sure, for sure. Well, the first thing that I'm thinking is talk about inclusivity, right? I think that's great. I have no, subject matter expertise on it, but I think that that's great. I have people in my life who are members of the disabled community. In fact, I have a staff member who is disabled, and while I don't believe he uses a service dog, um, I am fighting the good fight right now to get the door on the floor that we work at CTA's headquarters put on an automatic
Mm.
button so that he doesn't have to fight with the door when he comes into his workplace every day. It
Hmm.
is not equality, right? He has unequal access to his workplace. So I'm fighting that good fight right now, but I think that's a great story, and go doggies.
That's right. That's right. And thank you for fighting the good fight internally at your company as well, your organization. All right. The second story comes from right here in the state of Illinois, which became the first state in the U.S. to ban book bans. Our governor, J.B. Pritzker, signed a law making Illinois the first state to withhold funding from public libraries that ban books. So that's something that's actually been happening across the country, libraries banning books. And this new law requires libraries to adhere to the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights, which promotes freedom of information and prevents censorship.
Wow. So I heard that story and read the story. I think it was last week. My first thought on that is great. Like Illinois is the first state to put a ban on banning books. Great. But I'm also a little disturbed by the fact that we even have to, right? It's 2023, and we're seriously talking about banning books. And as you mentioned, so many states have moved in that direction. I think in the article that I read, it mentioned the number of states, and it might have been something like 22. Don't quote me there. But the point is, we have a number of states that are seriously banning books. It feels very much like Fahrenheit 457, which I believe was written in 1957 about book ban. Yeah, banning books, literally not owning books. And so it makes me sad that this is a conversation that we have to have and something that is happening. But I am also so grateful to Governor Pritzker for moving ahead with this and being the trailblazer in this area. So, yeah.
I know. Teresa, some of these good vibe stories are really you like really we're still talking about this stuff or finally or it's about time, so and you'll hear that recurring theme. So let's get to the next story, which is, oh, I lost it here. Just give me a second and I will pull that story back up. It is the next story is about the creator of Arthur, who has created a new TV show called Hop, a new animated series for preschoolers featuring characters with disabilities. So, Hop is an enthusiastic, empathetic frog with one leg shorter than the other. And the show is about teaching children about embracing their uniqueness through comedic adventure. So, the disability nonprofit Respectability is consulting on the series, and Hop himself is voiced by an amputee. So, really doing a nice job here.
Absolutely. Not familiar with the show, but now I'll have to go and look at it. I have a niece who is 9 months old, and we expose her to all things that honor and promote inclusivity. So, yet another story about being inclusive, and I love it, right? This is the work that we're doing, and the more that we show it, Bernadette.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
I lost my screen. I'm like, what happened? The more that we actually show inclusivity and we promote um, including everyone, equality means everyone, right? Being inclusive means everyone has a seat at the table. And I am extremely excited to know that this show is out there and that people from the disabled community who have children who talk about these things in their household, but our other households also talking about it and being exposed to it. So it sounds like a great show. I look forward to looking for it and introducing my niece to it. We look at one of the shows, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but they do sign language, and so I just think it's so important at a very young age to expose children to these type of platforms, and so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it shows that representation matters to them. I mean, children with disabilities now have the opportunity to see people like them on screen, and it normalizes this. So it starts to become less stigmatized. Theresa, just so you know, your screen is frozen, but I can hear you fine. So we're just going to keep going. All
Okay.
right. The fourth story comes from New York City, which has a new policy that's establishing a minimum pay rate for food delivery workers, starting at nearly $18 an hour beginning in July and increasing to nearly $20 an hour in April 2025. So this is for delivery workers who currently are earning an average about $7 per hour in New York, where the cost of living is among the highest in the US. So, pretty amazing to see policy sort of filling in the gap here because these people are undervalued.
Let that sink in for a minute. New York is one of the highest real estate markets in the United States. And a person or persons or groups of individuals earning less than $10 an hour as a living wage, it's not a living wage. You can't live off of that. So, once again, I celebrate the fact that in 2023, the great state of New York and the great city of New York have decided to pay food workers a living wage. $17 an hour is certainly, needed. Probably a lot more than that is needed, but good for them. I celebrate that. I think that is, great. I wonder what was the catalyst other than the obvious being that, people can't live off of $7 an hour. I know that the food industry, the restaurant industry relies heavily on tips, and sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't. So pay people a living wage so that they can earn a living and have shelter and food and all the necessities of life. That's great.
Exactly, exactly. When prices of everything are going up, wages should be going up correspondingly for sure, at least. Okay, so the last story from this week is from the U.S. Army, which has renamed a base in honor of Sergeant William Henry Johnson, a Black World War I hero. So, Fort Polk, which was an Army installation in Louisiana, has been officially renamed Fort Johnson, whose courageous actions on the front lines earned him the nickname Black Death and a posthumous Medal of Honor in 2015 awarded by President Obama.
Nice, nice. There's the story, that a lot of military bases had, historically been named after generals and, war veterans, but many of whom were associated with slave ownership, associated with, things that we, don't want to continue to honor. So I think it's wonderful that this gentleman is being honored and a base being named after him after so many years of, us trying to right the ship. I think there was another, I'm not sure if it was a military base or it was a building, but a building that was being named recently after a Native American individual. And, you know, there's always a little bit of groundswell when those things happen. Sometimes people from the community feel a certain way. They've called it one thing, you know, for so many years. But we have to stop honoring people who are on the wrong side of American history. So I'm really excited about this story, and good for them for taking that, you know, that leap and having the courage to do so, especially in the South. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that happening. I think this is probably the third or fourth time I've talked about this type of story on Five Things, maybe even this year alone.
Mhm.
There's certainly been a few in the past few months. So, you know, when I hear those stories, when I find those stories, you can bet I will bring them up on Five Things because these things still matter, don't
They
they?
still matter. We just talked about representation, right? Representation matters.
Exactly. Well, this week's call to action is a wonderful handbook, a transgender family handbook prepared by thecut.com, which offers 144 specific suggestions curated from transgender young people and their loved ones. And it is a great resource if you know someone whose child recently came out as transgender. So check out that resource. And thank you so much for joining. Theresa, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest this week. Do you have any parting words, or how can people contact you if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn as Theresa Fletcher-Brown. I work for the Chicago Transit Authority. We are a public agency. You can find me through CTA's website or call our 1-888 Euro CTA and ask for Theresa Fletcher-Brown. They would be happy to connect you with me. And Bernadette, I just want to again say thank you so much for having me. I want to share a really quick story. I about 6 months ago, I was cleaning an office of a former employee and came across some notes. Probably wasn't 6 months ago because at that point I had already met you. But I came across some notes where your name was scribbled and the Equality Institute was scribbled on it, and the note indicated call her. And so I'm not sure if they ever did, but I think it is fate that I am here today. And again, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here with you on this platform, and I really enjoyed it.
Wow, that's really well fortuitous, right? I love
Yeah.
it when the universe brings people together. So thank you again, and really appreciate all of your wisdom today. You have such a great wisdom about you, and I know all of our guests can feel that. So thank you so much. And if you don't already get the Five Things newsletter, you can subscribe at fivethingsdei.com. Have a great week. Thanks, Teresa.